There was something silent in the way Sheikh Zayed observed the world. He did not speak with urgency, but with a serenity possessed only by those who truly understand time. While many leaders of the 20th century fought over territory, influence, and power, he seemed concerned with something else, with meaning. In a world that was running faster and faster, he asked himself, where exactly are we going? This simple, almost childlike question may be the most important one the West has forgotten to ask. The West built empires, raised universities, mastered science, and multiplied its wealth. But in Sheikh Zayed's eyes, it made a mistake that does not appear in statistics, confusing advancement with evolution. He saw a world that was technologically brilliant but emotionally exhausted, economically prosperous but spiritually deprived. Western man, he said, had learned to conquer space, but not himself. This was, to him, the invisible wound of modern societies, the replacement of the soul with efficiency, of purpose with performance, of wisdom with fast knowledge. Sheikh Zayed came from a place where time moved at a different rhythm. The desert does not hurry. It teaches. It teaches that there are cycles for everything, that life blooms in silence, and that a man's power is measured by his patience. When he looked at the West, Zayed saw a civilization that had defeated nature, but had lost the ability to listen to it. He saw cities that never slept, people who worked more than they lived, and leaders who confused growth with greatness. And yet, he never spoke with judgment. He spoke with astonishment, the astonishment of someone watching a brother lose himself in his own intelligence. For him, the West's mistake was not having developed too much, but having forgotten why. Knowledge is a light, he used to say, but without values, it blinds. This simple and direct phrase reveals what Zayed saw as the greatest imbalance of the modern era, the loss of measure. When knowledge stops serving humanity and begins to serve it mechanically, progress becomes a form of idolatry. Man begins to worship his own creations, forgetting who created them. Sheikh Zayed did not want the East to close itself off from the West. He wanted the world to learn balance. He believed that the true future of humanity depended on the union of Western science and Eastern wisdom, that the mistake of one side could become the lesson of the other. And what he saw, with almost prophetic clarity, was that the West had moved away from the soul of progress. It had turned the pursuit of comfort into a pursuit of control, and freedom into isolation. He told stories of a time when the desert was the only school. He said the desert teaches a person to depend on others, because no one survives alone in the sand. A traveler who does not share his water dies surrounded by useless wealth. This image was, for him, the portrait of the modern mistake, a world that accumulated water but forgot the meaning of quenching thirst. The West had learned to multiply, but not to share. And this, Zayed said, is the beginning of spiritual poverty. Once, in a conversation with foreign diplomats, one of them asked what, in his opinion, was the greatest difference between Arab and Western values. Zayed smiled and replied simply, "You teach your children to compete. We teach ours to cooperate, but the world will need both." He did not speak as one who opposes, but as one who reconciles. He saw in the West an admirable intelligence, but a dangerous haste, a haste that consumes the soul while chasing success. The Sheikh believed that modern man had forgotten that every conquest without purpose generates emptiness. For this reason, he repeated to his ministers, "Build, but know why you are building." For him, the West's mistake was raising buildings taller than its principles, and this, at its core, was a universal warning. When a man's work is greater than his conscience, sooner or later, it devours him. Zayed believed that modern civilization was suffering from a kind of moral fatigue. The excess of information had stolen the space of silence. People knew everything, but understood little. They knew how to speak, but not how to listen. They knew how to express themselves, but not how to serve. The world had become a place of brilliant minds and exhausted hearts. And he knew early on that a nation only truly prospers when heart and mind walk together. When Sheikh Zayed spoke of wealth, he did not speak of figures. He spoke of balance. He said that a rich country is one in which a person feels useful, respected, and at peace. He saw in the West incredible power, but also growing loneliness, a civilization that multiplied possibilities, but reduced bonds. He feared that modern man would end up surrounded by everything he desires, yet distant from everything he needs. Therefore, when we speak today of the West's error according to Sheikh Zayed, we are not speaking of politics, religion, or economics. We are speaking of the loss of the center. The West, he said, built wings but forgot its roots. It became capable of crossing oceans, but incapable of being present where it stands. And that is where the desert surpasses it, because the desert teaches man how to remain. What Zayed wanted to teach the world was not an Arab model of life, but a human reminder. That wealth is not what is accumulated, but what remains. That progress is not what is measured, but what is shared. And that power without purpose is merely another form of a weakness. He believed that the future would demand not more speed, but awareness, and that the true error of the West would be to keep running without knowing the reason for the race. Sheikh Zayed believed that every civilizational imbalance is born from a simple confusion, when human beings forget that they were made to serve life, and not the other way around. This idea was the silent center of his thinking. To him, serving was not submission. It was the understanding that true power only fulfills itself when it is transformed into collective benefit. This was what he saw as missing in Western societies, an abundance of resources and a scarcity of purpose. Modern man had learned to command machines, but had forgotten how to govern his own heart. He saw material wealth as an opportunity, not as a medal. When oil was discovered, Zayed knew that the real test began there. He would say to his advisors, "If we do not use this wealth to elevate the human being, it will destroy us." This awareness is what set him apart from so many other leaders of his time. While many saw oil as an end, he saw it as a responsibility, a chance to educate, heal, and unite. This is the point he believed the West had forgotten. Wealth is a means, not a destination. When it becomes an end, it turns against those who possess it. Zayed observed that Western societies had become highly productive, yet deeply fragmented. Modern man worked more and more, but felt less and less meaning in his own work. They build a lot, but live little, he once said, not with criticism, but with sadness. He saw a world that had become an expert in efficiency, but an amateur in harmony. He understood that productivity without spiritual direction generates an invisible fatigue, the feeling of movement without a rival. In the deserts of Al-Ain, Zayed had learned the opposite, that every act, no matter how small, has meaning when done with awareness. The Bedouin who plants a tree in the desert knows that he may never enjoy its shade, but he plants it anyway. This simple gesture represented for Zayed the purest form of civilization, working today for something that will benefit someone you will never meet. This is the kind of mindset he believed the West had lost, the ability to act for the collective good without immediate reward. He often said that the modern world was sick with haste. People wanted to harvest before sowing, to gain before learning, to command before serving. Haste, he said, is poverty disguised as ambition. The desert had taught him that nothing blooms outside its proper time, and that everything that grows too fast creates weak roots. This lesson, simple and arid like the sand he knew so well, was also a global warning. No civilization survives the haste of itself. Zayed believed that the path to healing for the West would begin when human beings returned to respecting time, the time of things, of people, of nature, the time to listen, to understand, to reflect. He saw silence as a tool of wisdom. While the West valued speech, he valued listening. The wise person, he would say, is the one who listens more than he speaks, because those who listen to the world learn how to converse with it. But Sheikh Zayed did not advocate a romantic return to the past. He did not want the world to reject progress. He wanted progress to rediscover its soul. He wanted technology to serve humanity, and not the opposite. He said that science is a gift from God. The mistake is using it against man himself. For this reason, he invested in education, but never allowed education to become mere training. He insisted that every school should teach character before teaching profession, because knowledge without virtue creates skilled people, but dangerous ones. This vision, although deeply Arab in essence, is universal in wisdom. It touches something that every modern mind, deep down, feels: the absence of a center. Zayed believed that man gets lost not for lack of intelligence, but for excessive distraction. The West lost itself, according to him, because it confused freedom with dispersion. It became free for everything, except to be whole. And this is the drama of modernity, the soul fragmented by 1,000 possibilities. The Sheikh saw the East and the West as two eyes of the same face. One sees with practical clarity, the other with spiritual depth. When one closes, the world sees only halfway. He said that humanity needs to unite Western reasoning with Eastern consciousness, the logic of one and the wisdom of the other. Only then, he believed, would it be possible to create a balanced civilization, capable of prospering without destroying itself. This union of forces for Zayed was not a distant utopia, but an urgent necessity. The future, he said, will be arid for those who lose meaning, even if they possess all the tools. The real challenge is not to produce more, but to remember why we produce. The West's mistake is not manufacturing machines, but forgetting that man is also one of them, and that without a soul, no mechanism lasts. Sheikh Zayed believed that the 21st century would require a new kind of intelligence, a moral intelligence, the ability to use knowledge with wisdom, to balance profit with purpose, and to transform power into service. For him, true development would be that which elevates the human being, not merely that which entertains him. And this is the question he would leave to the world if he were still here. Are you happier now that you are richer? The answer, he knew, would be silent. Because modern emptiness does not scream. It exhausts. It is the exhaustion of a person who has everything and feels the absence of something he cannot name. Sheikh Zayed called this the absence of roots. When life loses the ground of purpose, every wind becomes a threat. He believed that the path back begins when human beings decide to place wisdom once again at the center. The wisdom of living less to have and more to be. And so, without speeches, he showed the way. He planted trees in the desert and said, "One day, birds will sing here." He built schools and reminded, to educate is to prepare the future. He cared for the poor and taught. Whoever serves loses nothing, only multiplies. His actions spoke the language the modern world has forgotten, the language of simplicity that transforms. He did not correct the West with words, but with example. Zayed believed that the great reconciliation between East and West would only happen when the entire world once again measured wealth in terms of harmony. That Western man would rediscover his soul when he returned to serving the whole, and not only himself. That true abundance would begin not with more inventions, but with more intention. He saw the future not as a race between powers, but as a collective learning. And he was convinced that progress without humanity is nothing more than a polished form of decay. Sheikh Zayed believed that civilizations do not fall when they become poor, but when they become too proud to learn. History, for him, was not a line of inevitable progress, but a cycle. Every society that forgets its origin begins, little by little, to lose its sense of existence. That is why he saw humility as the first step toward true wealth, a return to clarity. In a world accustomed to self-display, he reminded people that the quietest force is also the most stable. He used to say that the man who learns to bow before the truth never breaks. Zayed observed the West with admiration and gratitude for its advances, but he also saw with sadness how intellectual arrogance had infiltrated the soul of its institutions. Knowledge had become currency, and success a stage. He saw no problem with ambition. He saw a problem with pride that prevents listening. Modern man speaks about everything, but forgets to listen to what is essential, the sound of life, of others, of himself. In the desert, silence teaches. It teaches that the wind speaks, that the sand moves, that time responds, but only to those who learn how to listen. Humility for Zayed was not submission. It was clarity. The humble person does not diminish himself. He simply recognizes his proportion within the whole. He said that the arrogant man sees the world as a mirror, and the wise man as a window. One reflects his own image, the other sees beyond. And this distinction is what separates true progress from empty progress. The West, according to him, built a mirror so bright that it forgot to look through the window. The second virtue he considered essential, and which summed up his own life, was service. Sheikh Zayed did not believe that power was a throne. He believed it was a tool. He said that those who do not serve do not deserve to lead, and he served. He walked among the poor, spoke with shepherds, knew the names of workers whom most ministers would never see. This form of leadership is not born of political calculation, but of spiritual awareness. Zayed knew that those who serve others serve themselves, because everything that benefits the world returns to the source from which it came. This vision made him see work not as a means of gain, but as a form of contribution. He did not measure a man's value by the wealth he possessed, but by the usefulness he offered. This placed him in direct contrast with the modern Western mindset, in which prestige is often measured by the ability to accumulate. For him, true prestige lay in the ability to multiply good. And, curiously, it was this way of thinking that made him one of the most respected and prosperous leaders of his time. He believed that service is what transforms power into legacy and separates empire from selfishness. While the West taught its children to compete, Zayed taught his to cooperate. And this was not a cultural difference. It was a philosophical one, because competition creates temporary winners. Cooperation creates lasting prosperity. This simple idea is one of the most practical lessons he left to the world. All wealth that does not serve the collective is condemned to stagnation. But the heart of his wisdom lay in something even more subtle: vision. Zayed believed that the most dangerous mistake of a civilization is losing the ability to imagine the future. He saw the West trapped in a race for results, unable to think beyond a decade. He, on the other hand, thought in centuries. When he planted trees in the desert, he knew he might never see their shade. And even so, he planted them. Because he believed that the meaning of life is to leave the world a little more fertile than we found it. Vision, for him, was the act of seeing the invisible and working on it with faith. He said that the man without vision walks, but does not progress. And this is a truth that crosses borders. Today, billions of people live busy lives, but few know where they are going. They live in motion, but without direction. Sheikh Zayed saw the future as a moral mirror of the present. Tomorrow always reflects what human beings plant today. The West, by confusing innovation with evolution, forgot this simple law of nature. True progress is that which improves the human being, not only technology. He believed that the future of the world would depend on the union of these three virtues: humility, service, and vision, and that the imbalance of any one of them would lead to decline. Humility without action turns into submission. Service without vision becomes routine, and vision without humility generates tyranny. The balance of these forces creates a complete human being, and, as a result, a mature civilization. What Sheikh Zayed saw in the West was a confused humanity, endowed with means but lacking meaning, rich in information but poor in introspection. He said that modern minds were becoming too powerful and hearts too small, and he warned that this imbalance, if not corrected, would eventually turn knowledge into noise and progress into alienation. But the Sheikh also believed in reversal. He believed that human beings are capable of finding their center again. According to him, it required only one simple gesture: remembering to serve life, the land, the community. He said that the man who serves regains his axis, because in the act of serving, the ego dissolves and purpose reveals itself. The wealth that arises from this state is unshakable, because it does not depend on markets, but on consciousness. At its core, what Sheikh Zayed wanted to teach the West, and all of us, is that prosperity is a reflection of harmony, that a mind is only truly rich when the heart and the hands work together, that money is good when it serves, and dangerous when it governs, that power is beautiful when it protects and ugly when it oppresses, and that progress is only true when it reminds human beings that life is sacred. He said that there is no civilization without a soul, and no economy that survives without ethics. This is the gentlest and deepest warning the modern world can hear. Because while the West searches for happiness in new means, Sheikh Zayed found it in ancient principles, the same ones that have always sustained human societies before excess brilliance blinded vision. Sheikh Zayed believed that every civilization must, at some point, pause and look at itself in the mirror, not the mirror of power, but that of conscience. The West, with all its greatness, had become a master at building the external, but an apprentice at caring for the internal. He saw a world with strength but without direction, with a voice but without listening. and he said that modern man seemed to have forgotten the way back home. Not a home of stone or luxury, but the inner home, where silence and purpose meet. Reunion, according to Zayed, would begin with humility, the same humility that the wind teaches in the desert when it changes the shape of the dunes every day. The man who believes he dominates the world, he said, forgets that the world is always greater. Humility restores to human beings a sense of proportion. It reminds them that they are not owners of time, only its guests. This simple reminder has the power to correct everything: the economy, politics, coexistence. Because the humble person cares, the proud one consumes. The humble person observes, the proud one imposes. And it is in the subtlety of this difference that the destiny of nations is decided. But humility, for Sheikh Zayed, was not inaction. It was the starting point for service. He believed that serving is the highest verb in the human language, serving the land, the people, the family, God. In his view, whoever serves loses nothing. They merely transform power into meaning. He saw society as a living body, each person a cell, each gesture a heartbeat. When the body serves only itself, it falls ill. When it serves the whole, it flourishes. This philosophy, so simple and so forgotten, is the foundation of true wealth, the kind that does not need to be displayed because it is felt. Zayed believed that the error of the West, and of any civilization that forgets its soul, is to confuse freedom with separation, to believe that independence stands in opposition to interdependence. He taught that no one is truly free, while others are still trapped by hunger, fear, or ignorance. Therefore, the freedom he defended was not the freedom to do whatever one wants, but the freedom to be conscious of what one ought to do. This is the kind of thinking that, if understood, could transform the way the world understands progress. The third virtue, and perhaps the most urgent, was vision. Sheikh Zayed believed that true vision is moral, not merely technical. It does not consist in predicting the future, but in creating the kind of present that makes it inevitable. He said that a man without vision may have all the tools in the world and still get lost, while a man with vision may have nothing and still find a path. This was the essence of everything he built, the belief that the impossible yields to the persistence of those who act with faith. For Zayed, faith was not the opposite of reason, but the complement that gives it meaning. He saw God as the principle of order, the point where the visible and the invisible meet. And he believed that the ideal civilization would be one capable of uniting Western precision with Eastern spirit, engineering on one side and compassion on the other. He said that the mind is the engine, but the heart is the rudder. This metaphor summarizes his entire philosophy. The world needs both in order not to go in circles. In his view, the future belonged not to the fastest, but to the wisest. Not to those who shout, but to those who understand. Not to those who accumulate, but to those who multiply. He saw the 21st century not as an era of competition between power blocks, but as a test of spiritual maturity. The world, he said, will have all the knowledge necessary to survive, but it will only prosper if it learns once again how to care. The West's reunion with its soul, according to Zayed, would begin when human beings return to asking, "Whom does my work serve? What does my knowledge heal? What does my wealth sustain?" These simple and direct questions are the ones modern progress most avoids, and at the same time, the only ones capable of saving it. The person who has the courage to answer them discovers that wealth is not accumulation, but usefulness. That power is not domination, but responsibility, and that success is not speed, but permanence. Zayed believed that prosperity is a form of prayer. Everything that is built with good intention is in some way sacred. When a nation plants trees, educates children, protects the land, and honors the elderly, it prays, even in silence. And when it does this consistently, God responds not with miracles, but with stability. This was his faith in the reciprocity of good. Today, as the world struggles between an excess of information and a lack of meaning, the figure of Sheikh Zayed re-emerges as a reminder of the essential. He did not speak in terms of East versus West, but of humanity rediscovering balance. He taught that a mind without a heart creates power without direction, and that a heart without a mind creates compassion without effectiveness. Only when both are united, he said, Does humanity walk in a straight line again? And this is where his thinking touches what is most practical and contemporary. Any person, anywhere in the world, can begin this reconciliation within themselves. One does not need to be a ruler, an heir, or a saint. It is enough to act as he acted, with purpose, with patience, with love for what is simple. Those who work with awareness already serve. Those who serve with love already lead. And those who lead with humility are already rich, even if the world has not yet noticed. In the end, the error of the West is merely the reflection of a human error, forgetting that the soul also needs progress. And the message of Sheikh Zayed, more relevant than ever, is the antidote to this amnesia. He reminds us that the world does not need more power. It needs more wisdom. That technology is only the body of the future, but the soul still must be cultivated. Because all true wealth is born from a mind that thinks, a heart that feels, and a hand that serves. That is what Sheikh Zayed taught, without speeches, without promises, simply by living. And as long as East and West continue to see each other as opposites, the world will remain blind in one eye. But the day both look in the same direction, the day mind and spirit walk together, will be the day when, as he said, humanity will finally have learned to prosper in peace.